All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Edwin Van Riesen, and on behalf of Barco's Group and DTG, I'd like to thank you for attending our webinar today, titled Using Lean Six Sigma to Justify Innovation. We know your time is precious, and we hope you gain some valuable insights into the solution that we'll be going over. We do have a Q&A feature available on this webinar, so feel free to send us any questions, and we'll try to address them towards the end of the webinar. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Cam Shaheen from DTG. Go ahead, Cam.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the presentation. My name is Cam Shaheen. I work for DTG. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and I work with our end users to discover areas where they can utilize our products and then also leverage Lean Six Sigma as a methodology to help justify those innovative products. Anthony?
Hi, I'm Anthony Antonuccio. I'm Senior Vice President of Products and Marketing for DTG. And happy to be here and looking forward to seeing if what we have to say and what we're going to walk you through can help your business and your business processes. So our agenda today is first a very brief introduction about who we are at DTG. Then Cam is going to take over and talk about what Lean Six Sigma is, why it's important, and how you can use it to identify and measure waste and in the end, increase productivity, and building a case with an example. And we have many examples across different industries. So, and then we'll go into what drives innovation and the outcome and end with a Q&A. So with that, I will first give you the brief introduction. So DTG is about 8 years old. We're a battery systems company that builds solutions around our battery systems across a variety of industries. We started in hospitals, into warehouse supplying workstations for the largest e-commerce sites in the world. We moved into hospitality, into retail. So at the heart of our system is our lithium battery technology, and our solutions come in a variety of formats, but in the end, it's all about deploying workforces or doing a job at the point of what task is. And with that, I'll turn over to Cam.
So yeah, we're going to go a little bit into just an overview of what Lean Six Sigma is for those of you that aren't familiar with it. Lean Six Sigma is a combination of actually two different methodologies. One, you have lean, often called lean manufacturing, as well as Six Sigma, which is the other side of the methodology. Lean kind of is focused around waste, increasing efficiency. And then Six Sigma is focused on increasing quality, consistency throughout your operation. So how these two came together, you originally had lean being used by Toyota, famously, that a lot of people see them as the kind of the figurehead for lean manufacturing. And then Six Sigma, you have Motorola and GE. So Motorola and GE back in the 80s really adapted into Six Sigma, and that's kind of what helped bring all three of those companies, into how big they are nowadays. And so when you combine the two methodologies, you get a whole methodology that can kind of be used for any process, any part of your business that focuses on not only decreasing waste and creating more efficient processes, but also increasing quality at the same time. So then where do you use Lean Six Sigma? And the reality is you can use it anywhere. Every single business engages in processes every single day that have some inherent waste within them. You can be looking at how a company makes pizza, or how a company manufactures pharmaceutical drugs, and you'll find that Lean Six Sigma can actually be used in both situations. The reality of Lean and Lean Six Sigma is that we all do wasteful things, and just being able to identify those wastes can help you be more efficient in the future. So to the right, you can see the 7 different wastes. Their inventory wastes, waiting wastes, defects, overproduction, motion, transportation, and overprocessing. These all show up in very different ways. And the reality is they all have a cost attributed to them. So why is Lean Six Sigma important to my organization? It's kind of an area that I think a lot of people ignore. A lot of companies are willing to innovate in their revenue centers, the places that really drive revenue, but they're slow to innovate in areas where they're cost centers. The reality is there's marginal return on your revenue centers at a given point, and that's when you should shift your focus to, well, now I need to drive more efficiency, reduce cost, be more quality focused to reduce errors. So that's kind of why I think it's important to every organization, is no matter where you are in the life cycle of your company, it can help you grow and grow efficiently. Challenges when implementing Lean Six Sigma, I mean, there's a lot. I think one of the biggest ones is just buy-in from the organization. Change management is a huge problem. I think we've all encountered situations where we're trying to drive a change within our company, and then there's a lot of roadblocks, whether that's because of tribal knowledge or, well, I've always done it this way, why would I change? And the reality is, teaching people about Lean Six Sigma and the reasons why the methodology is important can help get over the hump of some of these other challenges. So first, we're going to look into how do you identify and measure waste. The reality is it can be somewhat difficult, and it's not always easy. Sometimes it's very simple. You can look at a process and say, yeah, that's just wasteful, and I can see why. If you don't necessarily have those situations, what I recommend is define the current state of your operations. So that means, let's say you have an area you're inefficient in and you want to focus on that area. We'll start looking at all the processes that exist within that area and define exactly what happens, steps A through Z on each one of those processes. Once you've done that, you'll start to see bottlenecks. You'll start to see areas that are like, oh, that's holding things up. Any types of repetitive processes, anything that doesn't necessarily add value to the product or the process itself should be taken out, or at least minimize the impact on the operation as a whole. Now, identifying and locating waste can be difficult, but when you map out the process and the different steps within that process, you start to see the waste a lot simpler. It starts kind of showing up in front of your eyes a lot easier. The reality is some waste can be very easy to see and some can be very difficult, but you don't always have to have the full picture to get to the point where you can justify the change you need to make. Sometimes only one type of waste within a process accounts for enough of an issue that you're like, we just need to change things. So it's a level of don't get caught in the weeds, and also, objectively looking at the process as well. So that kind of gets you to the next step, is once you've looked at the whole process, you have the steps laid out within your operation. That's when you begin to measure the waste you've identified. The reality is every single waste has a cost attributed to it. And doing the measuring can be difficult because a lot of times people don't know necessarily, like, how much does this cost me? The reality is every situation costs you labor or resources when it comes to waste. And when you're doing your labor calculations, it's often, I use the calculation of 1.5x whatever your salary is. So the reality is too, that your employees cost more than you think they do. And that's due to things like unplanned downtime, consumables used in operation, training, etc. All these things don't actually have added value to your operation. They have added value to your employee. So that's you investing in them, but that costs you money as a company. So the takeaway from this is removing waste increases productivity, efficiency, and profits. So the reality is when you look at all these things, you can start to see why Lean Six Sigma is important. So next thing you do, once you've started to measure the waste, you've looked at the process, you've identified what's going on, you start building a case. How you do that is by, in my opinion, leveraging your SMEs within your organization. They're the ones that are going to know the process inside and out. They're the ones who work in that process inside and out every single day. So they're the ones who will have the best insight on what is happening and where the problems are starting. They're often the best resource you will have in any given Lean Six Sigma project because they know the most. So from there, you kind of get into what I talked about before, is understanding your true employee costs when building a case. If a process is wasting an hour and a half every day, well, that's 1.5 hours of labor given, per time that process is done. Another way you can help build a case is look at solutions for your business. I think we all sort of have a good idea for what types of technology, products, etc., are used within our industry as kind of the next wave of how to do things. So I often recommend looking at those solutions and then saying, well, where would this fit within my company? And you can kind of reverse engineer from there. So let's say I'm trying to implement, you know, a new product that, well, we'll use our product, for example. We help make people more efficient moving throughout a facility. Well, you look at how much they move per day after you said, okay, well, this mobile workstation helps reduce waste and movement. So then you look at areas where you're moving a lot, and then you can kind of reverse engineer a case based on the solution you identified before you even look at your process. Lastly, you identify the stakeholders within a process. This could also be people outside of it. So when you are building a case, we're often very myopic within, well, the process starts here and it ends at Z. The reality is too that there are people outside of that process that are affected by whatever issues may be caused by the waste within it. So looking at not only the stakeholders within that process, but maybe the people downstream or upstream from that process who are affected as well. So the overall takeaway here is identify the stakeholders and strive to understand the true costs of the waste within that process. That's kind of really the core of building a case. And so next, I'm kind of going to show you an example of a case that we've built for other customers. So this is what we see. This is kind of that first stage of defining what is going on. So in this situation, we had a customer who was, this is their shipping process, I think. Hold on. Yep, it is their shipping process. So they were walking back and forth from a fixed workstation to where their product was being staged for outgoing. You know, so when you do that, in reality, it's maybe 60 seconds every time you do it. It doesn't feel that wasteful, but when you look at how many times a day you do that process is when the waste really starts to come in. So in this process, you had about 3 trips back and forth from fixed workstation to product to get information, bringing that manually recorded information back to the workstation to then enter it into your WMS, print out your labels, stage your shipment, and then bring it all back to the product and staging to let it go out. You start to kind of, when you even say it out loud like that, you can kind of see why there's waste and where the waste is. You know, motion waste is kind of the most obvious within this because you're walking back and forth, but manually recording shipping data is another example of waste. That would be called overprocessing. So within this process, you have not only motion waste, but you have overprocessing because you're manually recording information that more often than not can just be, you know, recorded using a hand scanner or an RFID scanner of some sort. So when you're looking at the process, you're starting to see the waste. You're starting to see how much waste there is per shipment, and you're kind of helping to start build that case. These are the define and measure stages of building a case. So then you map out your future state. You know, at this point, you've most likely identified what kind of solution you're looking to implement. So then you envision a process with it in that, or sorry, you envision the product within that process. In this situation, we did that with our workstations, and you can see that there's roughly 5 minutes of waste saved per shipment. Now, the process is also more efficient. You've taken out multiple steps. So while you're reducing waste, you're also gaining productivity by not having to spend as much time on that step every single day. And those productivity gains will be realized downstream somewhere. So this is kind of the what you gain slide. This is the core of the data behind your decision. You know, when looking at the process, you know, you're talking about 5 minutes waste per day per time you do it. Doesn't seem that bad, but then you add up, well, we do that 48 times a day, and you're looking at 240 minutes of waste a day, which is, you know, multiple hours of labor that you're basically just having people walk around doing nothing. And then over the course of a year, you're looking at about 27 grand in costs. And then over 5 years, it's 158,000. So when you look at that, you're starting to see, oh, wow, even seconds start to add up when you're talking about how often I do this process per day. And then it kind of on the right side, you can see these kind of what I call external benefits. I would say they're kind of like positive externalities that you get from removing waste from an operation. One, you're more efficient. Now the workflow is more seamless. There's less steps involved, so there's less opportunities for human error. You've eliminated waste. You've increased the productivity, obviously, as we said before. And I think what's often ignored as well is the decreased fatigue of your employees and improved morale can have an enormous impact on your operation. I think we all know how hard people work when their morale is high. And so when you can kind of make processes less laborious for your employees as well, you'll see that improved morale too.
Hey, Cam, I have a question here. The last point it mentions here about 51 days to reach ROI. What's that? Why is that important?
Well, I think a lot of the times companies make decisions kind of around how long it will take to implement something to get an ROI. So the shorter you can make your ROI for your company when looking at implementing an innovative solution, the easier buy-in you're going to get from them. These types of use case documentation can be incredibly useful when you're trying to convince your upper management, hey, we want to make this change. It's very difficult when you don't have these kind of cost calculations to say, hey, we want to spend 30 grand on this new product. If you just say that without any of the data and the measurements, most of the time you're going to get shut down. But if you were to do kind of the case building that we've talked about here, defining the process, measuring the waste, you start to see how it becomes easier to justify purchases like this.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, Cam.
So best practices. I kind of wanted to keep this slide in here because I think this is important to, Lean Six Sigma can be very, very quantitative. And the reality is it's a very mathematical methodology that's, for most companies, you will never need to get to the point where you're using black belt level methodology. The reality is most companies live in kind of the white to yellow belt range, which is you can see the waste with your eyes. You just maybe haven't measured it yet. So these tips are kind of, I think, important when we're all looking at the state of where our company is at. The biggest thing, and I think I've already said this once, is organizational buy-in. If you do not have everyone in the company on board with Lean Six Sigma, you're going to go nowhere. It's very difficult to really get the gains that you want as a company if you're kind of haphazardly introducing Lean Six Sigma to your operation. You need to make sure that everyone understands, at least at a base level, why it's important and kind of how it applies to you as a company. The second thing I want to say is every single voice matters. I can't tell you how many times I've been on customer sites and, we're walking through an operation and we're looking at different processes. And I stop someone who, maybe is just an hourly employee labor worker. And I ask them a few questions as they're the person doing the process. And the amount of insight you sometimes get from that voice can be even more impactful than the leadership group. And this is kind of why I think every voice matters within a company, is because they have insights into the weeds that you can't necessarily get into if you're a leader in your company. The third thing I want to reiterate is don't get lost in the details. If you've gotten to the point where the waste is so bad that it's obvious why you need to, justify a new purchase for an innovative solution, don't go any farther. You've done the work you needed to do. You've shown why this is important. This kind of gets into Lean Six Sigma being so quantitative and organized and very structured, which is good if you're, learning or if you're in a very complex organization. But most of the times you don't need to get lost in the details. You just need to define how bad it is and identify a solution. And that's kind of some of the things we've shown here today. One of the other tips is be willing to move on. Sometimes there's this preconceived notion of, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to fix everything in this process. And it's going to be this awesome solution for our company. And then when you start measuring, how bad it is right now and what problems it solves, it's not enough. It's not enough to really drive an ROI that's juicy enough to make a decision. And I think that's where sometimes you need to have the willingness to say, this isn't a fit for us. And then lastly, work backwards from the solution. I think I talked a little bit about this earlier, but we're constantly reading articles and videos like this, as well as many others that are saying, here are all these awesome solutions out there that apply to your company. Look at how that solution would work within your company and see if it has enough juice to really justify looking at it more. So a lot of the times these big sweeping technologies can be really expensive and very time consuming to implement. So, you know, if you know how bad it is when you're kind of thinking about those solutions, you can kind of start to identify where those solutions would make the most sense. So overall, I think it's about, to be effective, you need to be flexible and you need to have a holistic approach. It's important to collect data, but it's not the end all be all for how to do these kind of case building. It's important to just be a little bit flexible and look at things holistically.
That was really helpful, Cam. So in your experience, as you worked with a variety of customers, and some of the feedback has come back, and really, where's the intersection of where innovation begins from observed processes? And these are examples of solutions that DTG has built over time, where the process might appear the same, but companies, and many times their processes are like snowflakes. They are all individualized. Can you give an example here? Just take one of these, for instance, and can walk through how we arrived at a particular solution that was innovative, that didn't exist prior.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the bottom right corner, you can see kind of it's a stainless steel workstation that we kind of developed for the pharmaceutical manufacturing space. I was on site with customers. We were looking at something more for their warehouse logistics application. And because of my previous background in manufacturing, I asked about how they were producing product and doing data collection on the actual manufacturing floor itself. When we started to look at how they were doing it, they were walking back and forth about 10 seconds or so, you know, hundreds of times per production run, just to implement data, you know. So I was doing X step in the production process. Well, I had to record data. So then I bring that data over to a computer to enter it and then walk back to where I was on the manufacturing line to continue with my process. That motion waste back and forth was actually enough for them to justify bringing in a mobile workstation, which is what we helped develop below. So we went from, we were looking at a process, we were looking at how they were doing it in their current state, and then we were actually able to identify, okay, if we were to build a solution, this would solve a lot of waste for them. And so sometimes when I'm on site, this happens where, you know, I'm on site for one specific process, but when I'm looking at the way they're doing things across the board, I start seeing waste in other areas. And when you start to see the waste in other areas, you can start getting the mind rolling of, well, we could innovate and make something that applies to that. And I think that kind of goes across the board for every company. Is, you know, you might go into a certain area and you're thinking, oh, this is where I'm going to find the best solution for this product. And then you realize there's another area that could actually benefit even more. And so that's kind of how we do a lot of things, and how we drive a lot of innovation is just when I'm on site doing discovery, we see something else and we're like, that would be a fit. We could totally make something that would help solve those problems too.
And thank you very much. At this point, we'd like to hand it over to Barcodes, and Andrew, take it away. I'm sorry, Edwin, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Cam and Anthony. That was great. I loved especially when you say, you know, listen to every voice. How important is that? The person that does it probably knows best and can be giving you such insights in what
Absolutely.
waste you might be generating. So I really like that one. What I wanted to cover is, now that you've learned about DTG's cover offering, so you may be asking yourself, so then how does Barcodes Group fit into this? We are a partner of DTG, and the different Barcodes Group entities offer design, deploy, and support services required to get those solutions then implemented and maintained. So from a design and deployment standpoint, our professional services team, they can design a customized solution for you based on your environment, and then work with partners like DTG to develop and integrate a full solution to meet your needs and alleviate any pain points you have. Now, from a support standpoint, we can offer our true support services, which can include a mix of help desk, configuration, staging, kitting, and other value-added services. We have a support staff to deliver troubleshooting and repair services. And last but not least, we're North America's largest supplier of labels, receipt paper, ribbon, print hats, and other consumables. So our goal is to partner with your business to get you up and running, but more importantly, keep you up and running with future-proof technologies like those you saw today. Next slide, please. So to learn more about our solutions, please reach out to us if you have any questions, and let's jump into any questions. So Cam and Anthony. Now, someone says I thought it was interesting that you said to identify the stakeholders and that every voice matters. So does Lean Six Sigma bring in voices from other departments not directly related to the warehouse? For example, operations or IT, or how they contribute to the lean process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Lean Six Sigma as a methodology has you kind of look at the whole picture. So, with our products, we're often looking at operations and logistics and looking at the employees who are doing that, but there are other voices that matter, that stakeholders as well. So, we're powering IT equipment, so we need to talk to IT to learn how they deploy that equipment, what issues they face when deploying and maintaining that equipment. If there's anything we can solve, that's part of the ROI that we can provide for our client, as well as, things like the people behind making the decisions. You need to understand, at the executive level, why they want to make these changes. There are so many different motivations across an organization. So understanding all of them and all of the people that are touched by a given process can help you to create and find the best solution.
Great. And you touched on it, that Lean Six Sigma is a combination of two methodologies, like Lean and Six Sigma. So they're maybe two faces on the same coin. So can you quickly define again the two and explain how they work in detail?
Yeah, so lean, as I said before, comes from lean manufacturing. A lot of what lean was originally focused on is just eliminating waste from processes. So they're the ones who kind of created the 7 wastes. Because it was created in Japan under Toyota, they call it the 7 moda, which means waste in Japanese. And so that's all very, very, very focused on data and looking at how to eliminate steps that are not necessarily value added to a given process. Six Sigma, while having a similar focus around, improvement, is more focused on removing defects and errors from a process or product. And that's more focused on the quality side. So let's say I'm in a manufacturing process and there's one step that keeps producing errors. Well, Six Sigma would say, let's focus on improving that step. The reality is within that step, there's also waste. So you're eliminating errors and waste, and that's where the whole kind of approach of Lean Six Sigma comes into play.
Great, makes sense. Last one. Somebody is trying to solve a buy online, pick up in the store efficiency problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now you sketched, an example from a warehouse. Is the process similar if you had a issue like this?
Buy online, pick up in store is probably most similar to kind of what I would call a picking operation. So, you're often scanning, picking, and placing into a kind of, some sort of tote or workbench. The issue, I think, with a lot of BOPIS operations is the technology does not live with them when they're actually doing the picking for that given order. So yeah, a lot of that waste exists. A lot of the same motion waste that, well, actually, this is more rework waste. You'd probably have to rewrite that information down instead of being able to just scan it on the spot. So I think within BOPIS operations specifically, the issue is often you don't have the technology at the point of task, which is also something that we solve.
Great. Well, with that, we reached the bottom of the hour. Thanks, Cam. Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate the collaboration. Thank you, attendees. You will get a copy of the recording over the next few days, and appreciate everybody's time. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.